Good morning, people. Welcome to our world tour. Today we focus on Argentina in South America. And hopefully you have already seen the Loom version with the PowerPoint on Argentina. But in case you haven't or you had trouble viewing that, here is our YouTube video version of our tour of Argentina. So I'm going to try this. I'm juggling between my PowerPoint slides and my camera. Bear with me. Okay, so Argentina is in South America. It's a very large country in South America. The capital is Buenos Aires, and the currency, the money they use, is the Argentine peso. It's not the US dollar, it's not the Mexican peso, it's the US peso. No, sorry, the Argentine peso. It's been that kind of morning. I need more coffee. The official language is Spanish, but you're going to hear a lot of Italian and French and Portuguese. A lot of these European languages are spoken in Argentina because a lot of Europeans moved to Argentina between the 1800s to the present day, especially in the late 1800s, early 1900s. The government is a democracy, guys. They elect leaders to their legislature, they elect a president, they elect a vice president. So they have elected leaders. Now, this wasn't always the case. There were several instances where they had dictators take over. There's supposed to be a democracy, but one leader took over and was making all the rules. A dictator isn't elected, and they make all the laws. It's one person, kind of like a king, only they take power by force. All right, so they've had a couple instances of dictators trying to take over, but today they're a democracy. They elect their president and their legislature. They actually have a predominant religion. Predominant means mostly. So most people in this country of Argentina are Roman Catholic. They came from Europe, or their ancestors came from Europe. So somewhere between 80 to 90% of people practice Roman Catholicism. Now here's an interesting fact. You want to know where Argentina got its name? Early Spanish explorers found silver there, and they named it after argentum, which is the Latin word for silver. So there you go. Interesting facts. Now then, let's talk about the history. There were native cultures in Argentina before the Spanish came for many centuries. The Spanish conquistadors came in the 1500s and claimed the land for Spain, and they started a Spanish colony there. So the Argentina was a Spanish colony up until 1816 when they declared independence and became their own independent country. Now, here's something interesting. Most of the people in Argentina trace their ancestry back to Europe, not to South America. 86% of people there trace their ancestry back to Europe. Somebody in their family or people in their family in the last 200, 300 years came from Europe. Less than 10% can say their ancestors were native people in the land. It's a really small amount. Here's a group of people that helped shape the history of Argentina that we'll talk about maybe once or twice more. Gauchos. Those are cowboys. A huge amount of Argentina is open grassland, which is great for raising cattle and sheep, but you need people to take care of them. So the gauchos, the rough riding cowboys in Argentina and in South America, are the people who helped shape the country, and there are a lot of stories about them. So when we talk about cattle, raising cattle, the gauchos are the cowboys of Argentina. All right, let's talk about geography for a moment. There are basically four regions. The north, which comes up against Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay. There's lots of rivers, lots of tropical rainforests. Hopefully you've at least looked at the PowerPoint because There's a slide on there that actually shows Iguazu Falls, which is a huge waterfall. A lot of tourists go there to see the waterfalls in the tropical rainforest in northern Argentina. Then you've got along the west side the Andes Mountains. So you have a section of the country called the Cuyo, or the Andes region, that is in the mountains. The Andes Mountains are some of the tallest mountains in South America. They are impressive, to say the least. Then you've got in the middle of the country the Pampas, or the grasslands. That's another big section. That's where a lot of your farming and cattle raising go on. That's where you find Buenos Aires, the capital city. And then the lower half of the country is known as Patagonia. And as you go farther south, it gets colder because you're in the southern hemisphere and you're getting closer and closer to Antarctica. And it gets a lot drier. They have some huge deserts and dry areas, dry grassland areas in Patagonia. And it goes all the way down until you start hitting glaciers and things like that. Again, there's a picture in the PowerPoint of one of the major glaciers that you'll find near the southern tip of Patagonia. The southern tip of Patagonia is the jumping off point, or one of the main jumping off points for people who are actually going to Antarctica. You have scientific stations there, and you have scientists who go to spend months at a time in Antarctica. One of the two main places that they have to go through to get there is the southern tip of Argentina and Chile. What's interesting to note, if you look at a map, 1 out of every 3 people live in Buenos Aires, in the city. Most people live in major cities. Can you imagine if 1 out of every 3 people in the United States lived in Los Angeles? How packed would that city be? It'd be huge. Buenos Aires is a huge metropolitan city, and literally 1 out of every 3 people in Argentina live in Buenos Aires. Now, something else to note, in the 1850s, cattle was big, and they needed to be able to transport cattle and sheep long distances quickly. So they invested in a great railway system that's still in use today. Railroads running especially through the northern half of the country, but even down through Patagonia, were invaluable and have been invaluable for well over a century and a half. All right. Now then, in the PowerPoint again, there are pictures of the Pampas, the cattle being driven by a gaucho through the grasslands, and a picture of the sheep that are also grazing in the grasslands. Livestock is huge, and especially beef. There's a lot of leather tanning and leather work because of the huge amount of cows. There's a lot of wool production and woven goods because of the sheep, all the wool they produce. There's also cotton grown there. There are large farms where they grow corn and wheat and soybean and enough grains to basically to feed the country. They also have a lot of fruits, vineyards, orchards, a lot of farms that raise food. For many years, Argentina was self-sufficient. That they could feed all the people within their country on their farms. Now then, other natural resources. You've got oil, iron, copper, silver. There are a lot of mines in certain parts of Argentina, and they produce their own oil. Another thing they have a lot of, especially in the north, is rivers. They invested in hydroelectric dams across the rivers in many places to produce electricity for their country. So a huge amount of the population gets their electricity from the rivers pushing through turbines in the dams and it creating electricity. Hydroelectric power is a big one. All right. Then tourism. Now, I talked to you for a moment about tourism. If you Google pictures of Argentina or looked at the PowerPoint, you'll find pictures of brightly colored buildings that in Buenos Aires and some very, very ornate, decorated European style buildings for their legislature and their national library. there's a large European influence in their architecture, and there's a lot of vibrant colors. You'll also see pictures of Iguazu Falls, Iguazo. It's pretty impressive waterfalls. And that is in the north by Brazil. Excuse me. Now then, you'll also find pictures of Perito Morona Glacier. It's in Patagonia. It's one of the most famous glaciers in Patagonia. It's pretty impressive. So it shows you how the climate goes from the tropical rainforest in the north all the way down to those cold glaciers near the southern tip in Patagonia near Antarctica. Now, you might want to look up famous people from Argentina and parts of their culture. The tango is probably one of the most famous things to come out of Argentina. It is a dance that was made in Buenos Aires in the early 1900s and made its way to Europe and to the Americas, the rest of the Americas. Became a very popular ballroom dance. So you can Google the tango and actually watch videos of people doing the tango. Well, like I said, beef is big there. When it comes to food, people love a good asado, which is a barbecue. And empanadas are very, very well known there. That's a fried pastry with good stuff in the center, whether it's fruit or vegetables or meat or whatever. You can look up empanadas and see about maybe you want to try to make one today. Who knows? People who are famous from there: Pope Francis, Lionel Messi. And then as I did my research, I found a long list of other soccer players like Messi who come from Argentina, and that's most of the famous people Argentina exports are soccer players because soccer is so big there. One last thing to look up would be animals. One lovely large rodent that lives in Argentina and Chile is the capybara. Capybara. You can look that up. It is a funny looking rodent that's pretty big. It'd be fun to do some research on that. Also, how many Spanish words can you memorize in one day? That's another challenge for you today. Have fun looking up a little more about Argentina. Hope you've learned just a little bit. Have fun finishing your passport on Argentina. And until I meet you again on Wednesday in Brazil, adios.